These companies support the Thom Hartmann Program. They are Gabi.com. Gabi takes the pain out of shopping for insurance. More info at Gabi.com/Tom. Teeth, Smarter Pet Dental Help. More info at teethhealth.com, code TOM. HelloFresh, delivering fresh ingredients and mouthwatering recipes. More info at hellofresh.com, code TOM. Bowl and Branch, crafted for the common good. More information at bowlandbranch.com, code TOM. ExpressVPN, the VPN that just works. More info at expressvpn.com/Tom. And CB Distillery, CBD for sleeping. More info at cbdistillery.com, code TOM.
It's the Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study by Stefano Harney and Fred Moten. This is from the introduction. It starts with love, exchange, fellowship. It ends as it begins, in motion, in between various modes of being and belonging, and on the way to new economies of giving, taking, being with and for. And it ends with a ride in a Buick Skylark on a way to another place altogether. Surprising, perhaps, after we have engaged dispossession, debt, dislocation, and violence, but not surprising when you have understood that the projects of fugitive planning and black study are mostly about reaching out to find connection. They are about making common cause with the brokenness of being, a brokenness, I would venture to say, that is also blackness, that remains blackness, and will, despite all, remain broken, because this book is not a prescription for repair. If we do not seek to fix what has been broken, then what? How do we resolve to live with brokenness, with being broke, which is also what Moten and Harney called debt? Well, given that debt is sometimes a history of giving, at other times a history of taking, at all times a history of capitalism, and given that debt also signifies a promise of ownership, it never delivers on that promise, we have to understand that debt is something that cannot be paid off. Debt, as Harney puts it, presumes a kind of individualized realization to a naturalized economy that is predicated upon exploitation. Can we have, he asks, another sense of what is owed that does not presume a nexus of activities like recognition and acknowledgement, payment and gratitude? Can debt become a principle of elaboration? Moten links economic debt to the brokenness of being in the interview with Stefan Shukatis, who he acknowledges that some debts should be paid and that much is owed, especially to black people, by white people. And yet he says, I also know that it is that what it is that is supposed to be repaired is irreparable. It can't be repaired. The only thing we can do is tear this stuff down completely and build something new. End of quote. The Undercommons do not come to pay their debts, to repair what has been broken, to fix what has been undone. If you want to know what the Undercommons wants, what Moten and Harney want, what black people, indigenous people, queers, and poor people want, what we, the we who cohabit in the space of the Undercommons want, with the recognition and acknowledgement generated by the very system that denies A, that anything was ever broken, and B, that we deserve to be the broken part. So we refuse to ask for recognition. And instead we want to take apart, dismantle, tear down that structure right now. That right now, limits our ability to find each other, to see beyond it, and to access the places that we know live outside its walls. We cannot say what new structures will replace the ones we live with yet, because once we have torn stuff down, we will inevitably see more and see differently and feel a new sense of wanting and being and becoming. What we want after the break will be different from what we think we want before the break, and both are necessarily different from the desires that issue from being in the dark. Let's come at this by another path. In the melancholic and visionary 2009 film version of Maurice Sendak's Where the Wild Things Are, 1963, Max, the small seeker who leaves his room, his home, his family to find the world beyond, finds a world of lost and lonely beasts, and they promptly make him their king. Max is the first king the wild things have had, whom they did not eat, and who did not, in turn, try to eat them. And the beasts are the first grown things that Max has met, who want his opinion, his judgment, and his rule. Max's power is that he is small while they are big. He promises the beasts that he has no plans to eat them, and this is more than anyone has ever promised them. He promises them that he will find ways through and around, and will slip through the cracks and re-crack the cracks if they fill up. He promises to keep sadness at bay and to make the world with the wild creatures that roared their gnashed their terrible teeth and rolled their terrible eyes and showed their terrible claws. That Max fails to make the wild things happy, or to save them, or to make the world with them, is less important than the fact that he found them, and he recognized in them the end of something, and potentially the path to an alternative in his world, or an alternative to his world. The wild things were not the utopian creatures of fairy tales. They were the rejected and lost subjects of the world Max had left behind. And because he shuttles between the edible land where his mother rules and the ruined world of the wild, he knows the parameters of the real. He sees what is included and what is left out. And he is now the home to which he wants to return. Moten and Harney want to gesture to another place, a wild place that is not simply the leftover space that limbs real and regulated zones of polite society. Rather, it is a wild place that continuously produces its own unregulated wilderness. The zone we enter through Moten and Harney is ongoing and exists in the present, and as Harney puts it, some is already being enacted, fulfilled in the call itself. While describing the riots of London in 2011, Harney suggested the riots and insurrections do not separate out the request, the demand, and the call. Rather, they enact the one in the other. The book is The Undercommons, Fugitive Planning and Black Study. The book, A Castle in Wartime.
Is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Well, it's Thursday. They're still counting votes in Pennsylvania and Arizona and Nevada, and it's looking like Pennsylvania is almost certainly going to go to Biden. The vote counting has stopped in Allegheny County as a result of the intervention of a court. A lawsuit from the Trump folks, but it's supposed to resume tomorrow. Nevada, and it may well be a major piece of this. As we've talked about earlier in this program, in previous days, the reason that the vote is coming in slow in so many of these cities is because their voting systems have historically been underfunded by, I was going to say, conservative control or Republican control legislatures, and in most cases that's the case, but I think you could even more broadly say white control legislatures. Democrats were the racists in Georgia up until the 60s and still had a real, there were still a few of them hanging on right up until the 90s. But, the bottom line is that we have always underfunded schools in neighborhoods that have large minority communities, education facilities, and pretty much everything else, it made it harder for black entrepreneurs, made it harder for black small business people, made it harder to vote. And, and we see this in the lines, right? Every year, what do we see on TV? All kinds of pictures of long lines of mostly African Americans waiting to vote. So, there's a bunch of election stuff happening, and our lines are open throughout the show today. Whatever you'd like to say, or whatever thoughts you have on the election. There are a few things I want to point out, though. Number one, Mitch McConnell according to two different sources, Jonathan Swan at Axios and CNBC, a reporter from CNBC. Hang on just a second, I've got his name here. Eamon Javers are both reporting that he is not going to allow the Senate to confirm any cabinet members for Joe Biden's cabinet, Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury. He's not going to let that happen if they are, quote, radical liberals, end quote. And that Joe Biden is apparently ready to go along with that and appoint, quote, centrists. So instead of Elizabeth Warren running the Treasury Department, we get, what, banker Jamie Dimon? I mean, you know, it's this is wrong. This is just wrong. And you know what Donald Trump did when he had people that he knew as the former director of national intelligence, acting director, in other words, never confirmed by the Senate, but he was the director of national intelligence. That guy is now saying, oh yeah, there's voter fraud going on, there's election fraud going on right here in Vegas. And Soboroff is like, can you give me one piece of evidence? No, I'm going to go hide in my bus. But this is what's going on. So if Biden wants to I'm trying to be very careful with my language here. If Biden doesn't want to have progressives in his cabinet, he now has a ready-made excuse. In Mitch McConnell. No, we disagree with. Yesterday, Biden tweeted, it was a tweet, no doubt it was his staff, it was excerpted from us, in which he said words to the effect of, once the election's over, we need to set aside the angry rhetoric. We are not enemies. We are simply political competitors or adversaries. Set aside the angry rhetoric. I replied, I tweeted back to him, are you know, don't you friggin'. And it was fascinating to look at the just outpouring of tweets from Democrats to the Joe Biden, the official Joe Biden account, saying, don't you dare, or words to that effect. anyhow, we'll continue this conversation going forward. First, we have to get Biden in the White House. That would be a good step. The other thing that I think is worth noting, I want to get into this at some length, is I was talking yesterday about the impact of talk radio. There's a great diary over on Daily Codes right now. It's in fact, it was the number one diary. It may well still be the biggest political mistake in history. It's the radio stupid. Pointing out that there are radio stations all across the country, 24/7, $5 billion a year worth of promotion handed to the Republican Party by right-wing radio hosts. My colleagues, Rush Limbaugh, Sean Hannity, Michael Savage, Mark Levin. These people literally reach tens of millions of people a week. I believe they reach more than 100 million people in any given month. And the biggest push has been Hispanic or Spanish language talk radio. And this is something that we really need to be paying attention to. In 94 radio stations in 6 critical states. Well, that's about the University of Florida stations. Here we go. This Wednesday, Limbaugh is yelling with royal stern. This is from this by Sir Taniat. This diary recounts. Limbaugh is on stations all over Florida, but also is all over the place. And this from the New York Times today, from a piece by Patricia Mazzei and Nicole Pelroth, is that in Miami, Spanish language radio show Cara Tarde de Carinas Moncada I can't even say it all, pushed debunked claims late Tuesday that Republican poll watchers have been barred from observing voting locations in Pennsylvania. It's a lie. In September, one of the show's co-hosts had pushed a conspiracy theory that a co-founder of Black Lives Matter was involved in devil worship. The hub of much of that information is South Florida. A Colombian political analyst in Sarasota, Florida, says he's worried about this misinformation. one of the largest Spanish language Twitter accounts that is trashing Joe Biden and is saying that the election is being stolen from Donald Trump is based out of Colombia, a country with a right-wing government that is tightly aligned with the with the Trump administration, with the Republicans in the Trump administration. And this account, I mean, this is a pretty shocking thing. False news targeting Latinos trails the election is the headline in today's New York Times. And Roboto, they falsely repeated again and again in Spanish. In other words, robbed is what Roboto means. George Soros is funding violent Antifa riots. Black Lives Matter and Biden are socialists. And the election is rigged against Trump. Spanish language accounts with huge followings on Facebook have falsely said that Trump won early on, and the social media is censoring his win, and Biden is cheating. I mean, it just goes on and on, right? Lies in Spanish. There are more Hispanics in America than African Americans, and the Republicans have their sights on this group.
This is the Thom